Welcome, AC Athletics parents and students. If we could get started, if somebody could just put in the chat to make sure thumbs up that you guys can actually hear us before we do some introductions, just so I know we are coming through. If somebody could do that for us, I would appreciate it. And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to wait. There's a little bit of a lag, so we'll go ahead with introductions. All right, there they come. You can hear us. Fantastic. So for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Jesse Harper. I'm the superintendent of Arkport, and we'll go around the circle here, the square, and I'll let everybody else introduce themselves.
My name is Dale Steiner. I'm the athletic director for Arkport Canaseraga Wolves.
I'm Chad Groff, superintendent at Canaseraga.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kobe Hahn, and I'm the 712 principal at Arkport.
So I'm going to hand it over. We're going to bring up a presentation that Mr. Steiner is going to go through. If you haven't been part of these before, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comment sections. They'll pop up. All four of us are here to help answer any questions that we can at this point. There's a lot of changing information, even up to about 5 minutes before this meeting. So go ahead and put questions in if you have them. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Steiner for the presentation.
Good evening, everybody. The first thing I'd like to do is thank everyone for your continued patience and flexibility. It's been an interesting start to the school year and our athletic season. I thought I'd be swamped with questions the last couple of weeks, and you guys have been great. You've been patient, and I really want to thank everyone for that. What we're going to do today is focus mostly on how we're going to start practices and what some of the guidelines will be for that. That's going to be our main focus for the night. So returning to athletics, we'll start with the first slide. The fall sports start dates and general information. So we are going to be starting all levels of soccer and cross country on the 21st of September. The state has changed our practice requirements. It went from 6 practices before the first contest to 10 practices before the first contest. So that's a pretty big change. Now it's about 2 weeks of practice before our first games. As we all know, volleyball is considered a high-risk sport, and that has been moved to March 1st. And that will be considered, from now on, it's going to be considered fall 2. All right, next slide, Mr. Harper. Some expectations for our student athletes. Maintaining our distance, our 6 feet distance is going to be a priority. I know it's going to be a little difficult when we're doing drills and we're practicing, but we will be wearing masks. And some other things, students need to tell coaches immediately if they're not feeling well. This is for coaches and players and referees. There's no hugging, no high fives, no shaking hands or fist bumps. All right. And then one of the biggest things we're going to need to make sure that the athletes have their own water bottles, and they need to be clearly marked. We don't want anyone sharing water bottles. Next, please. Some expectations for the coaches. Coaches will be wearing masks at all times throughout the practice, throughout the game. They need to set clear expectations for these student athletes. So that will be discussed day one, their expectations. There needs to be a lot of communication with the situation that we have going on here. So communication will be very important between the coaches and the athletes. Again, no hugging, high fives, shaking hands, or fist bumps. Right. Next slide, Mr. Harper. Expectations of our parents and spectators. First of all, we need to disinfect students' personal equipment after each game or practice. Responsible parties must limit, that's a whole nother situation that just changed, unfortunately, that we'll talk about, but provide personal items to children and clearly label them. If we have fans in the stands, they're going to need to be separated. They're going to need to be 6 feet apart and wearing masks. Next slide.
So we'll bring up one of the questions that just popped up.
Okay.
So for everybody that's new to these, some of our parents have gone through this with reopening. As you ask questions, we can pull them up. And so do fans have to wear masks also at outdoor events, Mr. Steiner?
Yes, they will be wearing masks all the time while they're out at outdoor events.
Mr. Groff, do we want to take a pause here and just talk about what we discussed with the health department today? Oh, you got to unmute yourself, Mr. Groff. There we go.
Sorry about that. Just so parents and athletes and coaches or normal spectators, grandparents who might be joining us, Mr. Harper and I did attend a meeting today with Steuben County officials, the executive director of Steuben County, and also the director of Department of Health. And right now, if you have had a chance to read the guidance that was put out by NISFA, the state organization, there is verbiage in there that talks about no more than 2 spectators per athlete, and also following local Department of Health guidance as far as our particular region, or in our case, a county. We did ask Jack and Darlene from Steuben County today if you're not aware, there's a current maximum occupancy at an event of 50 individuals. So those that have potentially gone to a wedding, the protocols in place right now are 50 people max. So we did ask the question as far as, what is the guideline right now? Is it 2 spectators? Is it a maximum of 50 people? And at this point, unless something changes, it would be a maximum of 50 people at the event. So, for example, obviously with many of our levels, if we have 20 kids on a soccer team for AC Athletics and the team comes to play us and there's 20 kids, maybe 2 coaches apiece, 2 referees, we're at that 50 maximum very quickly. And we are going to try to get some more guidance on that and see if that changes over the next 2 weeks of practice. So while we hope that guidance changes, we also want everyone to be aware that there is a possibility that that 50 max event will still be in place once we start games, which would mean pretty much for all of our sports, no spectators.
And that change would need to come directly from the governor's office because that is a limit statewide on non-essential gatherings. And they are classifying sports as non-essential. And that is because academics are required and sports are voluntary. So we're looking for some leeway there, but at this point, we will not have spectators. If that continues into the season where we cannot have spectators, we will work on streaming the activities, but we're hoping for some leeway.
I guess I'll just put a political plug in. If you feel like you want to contact the governor's office as a parent, by all means, you can certainly do that and express, I guess what I'm assuming is probably displeasure with that 50 max. And if you need any help with that, I'm sure Mr. Harper and I can point you in the right direction.
We'd be happy to.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in, and as part of the meeting that occurred earlier today, we were informed that Section 5 talked with the executive director of NISFA, Robert Zayas, who then passed on our concern and want for clarification to the governor's office. So our request for clarification is already there. the response time that we'll get, we don't know, but we're certainly looking into it and hoping for the best.
Anything else on this slide, Mr. Steiner?
Nope. I did put down a few important dates. Most of them I've announced already. So on Monday of next week, we will start all levels of the sports that we plan to have. A practice schedule and a shuttle schedule went out today. I hope all of you have seen that and you were able to open it. I know the first one I sent was a little jumbled. So bear with me as I learn the Remind system. Kobe is helping me quite a bit, and I'm still learning that. October 2nd would be our first possible day to schedule a game. That's if we're practicing Monday through Saturday. I think that says October 12th. The 7 consecutive day rule is waived. For anybody that doesn't understand that, I will explain it real quick. Basically, right now, you can't play or practice 7 straight consecutive days, and that's why most people take Sundays off. So on the 12th, that rule will be waived, so you could have games or practice on Sundays. That will not be something that we will be trying to do. It's not something we're going to be scheduling at this point. So that will probably still be a day off in most cases. October 19th is the first date that we can play outside of our section or league. And then the last one on there, if you are here and you have athletes in winter sports also, that season will now start on November 30th.
Just if I can jump in, Mr. Steiner, just in case it is roaming through anybody's minds. And I know, again, we're trying to focus on just getting started, but I'm sure athletes are wondering, will we have sectionals? That determination at this point is a yes. There is plans to do sectional play. So in case you wanted to know that, again, unless something changes, that is the plan at this point.
I can say that the regular season right now is scheduled to end on November 7th. And then there'll be 2 weeks of sectionals after that. So the season could go to November 21st. I believe that's it for the information that I wanted to pass out, just some general stuff. I think we'll be taking questions now as much as we can.
Yeah. So start typing your questions in. We tried to keep the slides to a minimum. First question there, Von Hoyt. Yeah, I went through that quickly, but if we are not allowed to have spectators, the districts will absolutely look into being able to stream events. I can say that streaming one event at a time is most likely possible. When we have multiple events on multiple venues between Arkport and Canaseraga, that might get tough. But it's something we should be able to do, and we'll just have to look into how we're going to do that and the schedule of that. But I'm optimistic that we will get some clarification on fans before that. Next up, Mr. Steiner, are there a limited number of participants?
That's a tricky question, depending on the sport right now. They're asking us to, first of all, they're asking us, especially for away games, not to bring unessential people, so to speak, and maybe try to limit our teams a little bit. That number has not been set at this point. However, for cross country, there will be some limitations possibly. But that is, again, we had a meeting today as athletic directors, and we had a long discussion over that. If there's more than 2 or 3 teams, 3 or 4 teams at a cross country event, then we're going to have to limit the number of participants because it's going to get to 50 pretty quickly. So we have talked about, when it comes to cross country, just having a head-to-head competition against another school. And that way we would hope to get all of our athletes a chance to participate in an event. We don't want to cut it down to 12 because we know we have more than that, especially in cross country.
It's our goal and we gave Mr. Steiner the request of going to his meetings and making sure, or trying as hard as possible to get the, especially cross country, to dual meets so we could get the most kids possible. So next up, do you have a protocol yet for attendees for senior night?
Okay, another thing we talked about at our athletic directors meeting today. One of the things we found out today was that possibly the number of athletes that are at an event will quickly equal 50. So without spectators there, at this point, we're not sure what we're going to do for senior nights. But as no one will be able to attend if there's no, if the maximum is 50, then no one will be able to attend the senior night.
Mr. Groff, I think we can safely say that if we get into seasons and there are no spectators, that we will become creative in how we honor our seniors this year. Canaseraga and Arkport, we got creative with graduation last year. So spectators or not, seniors will be recognized this year in some fashion.
Yeah, I thought occurred to me, and we can obviously have conversation about this, but thanks for your question, Scott. Maybe one of the things that we do is try to do that senior recognition before the other team actually comes. Kind of do that, parent-child thing. And unfortunately, at that point, once the other team arrives, then it would mean not being on site. But again, we'll certainly try to be creative. If parents or others have suggestions of how we can potentially try to do that, we're certainly up for suggestions.
Yeah, and when we were working under the guidance that we could allow 2 spectators per athlete, because of the uncertainty in just about anything and everything these days, we had talked about doing the senior nights early, maybe first game as opposed to later in the year as they traditionally are, just because we want to make sure that they occur.
All right, next up. Can the girls that can't play volleyball now sign up for soccer?
The answer to that question is yes. The state has made a determination that athletes could possibly play 4 sports this year now. So the answer to that question is yes. Volleyball players could sign up for soccer or cross country.
And thank you, because I immediately jumped there about playing 4 sports. So it's nice that the state has made that allowance. Do we know how I'm asking a question now. I'm sorry. Do we know how we're going to run that with any girls who might want to switch, Mr. Steiner?
We could do a quick sign up, I guess, in the next day or two. We could send something out as far as a sign up. But everybody should have received that schedule too, and they know when to show up, I guess, for practice if it does occur. But I think we should have a sign up in the next day or two. We'll try to get that out. I think we can probably do one online. You think, Mr. Hahn? Okay. Yep, we'll plan on doing that.
Next up, what is the protocol for kiddos who practice on their at-home days? You want me to take this one, Mr. Steiner?
Sure.
Okay. So they will need to come to practice, be brought to practice on their own, even if they're on their at-home days. So this is just a Arkport issue. Mr. Groff, do you want to explain to the Arkport community what your schedule is like?
With our high school and elementary, we are going 5 days a week, 4 days.
Okay. So it's really just an Arkport problem. So the students that are at home can practice. They will need to get to practice on their own. At this point, we do not have the capacity to run buses for at-home students. That might change as we get a few weeks into the year, but right now, because we had to cut our capacity to half on the buses, according to the guidance from the state, we do not have the buses or the drivers to pick kids up on their off day. But students who are on their at-home day should be going to practice, and the coaches will be temp checking and asking the questions of those students when they arrive at practice.
Can I clarify something also, Mr. Harper?
Absolutely.
We're talking about getting to the shuttle. And in some cases here, we're talking about getting to the shuttle. So the shuttle schedule is out starting next week. So as a parent, they will have to get to the shuttle at Arkport if they're going to Canaseraga for practice. And in Canaseraga, they'll have to get to the shuttle at the Canaseraga school to get to a practice in Arkport.
As a follow-up to that from Mrs. Jones, will they be penalized if they are late?
I have a coaches meeting tomorrow, and I will make that a point of emphasis that we are not going to penalize them. However, hopefully it's not something that happens every day. We're talking about the coaches are going to have to say something at some point to the student about trying to get there on time. As parents, communicate with the coaches. And I'm sure they'll be pretty lenient with this situation.
And as a follow-up on that, or if they can't make it, we may have students who just do not have the ride to a practice.
My only concern with that early on is that they need to get 10 practices before their first contest. And as you know, this season is going to be very tight. So missing a game or two, might be a fourth of their season in that situation, possibly.
So I think the number of students who can't find rides, that's going to be something that Mr. Hahn as the 712 principal and Mr. Steiner as the AD will work on. I don't think we're talking about a large number of students, and so we'll try to problem solve with those individuals. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Yep, we'll have a senior night. Don't worry. Parents don't need to take it into their own hands. We'll figure it out. We will take parents' help in figuring this out, but we will definitely have a senior night. Next question: concussion exams, are they being scheduled?
At this point, no. We may try to do something as the season goes on. I'll have to talk to Mr. Hahn about that. The number of kids that we would have to schedule and trying to find a place for them to do it in the school would be hard at this point.
So they are not being scheduled at this time.
Not right now, and they're kind of lumped in a sense with the physicals being extended until January 1. So nobody's ineligible because they haven't had a concussion test at this point because everything's been extended. We believe in the value and validity of those concussion exams, and we know they're important, but we're operating under the guidance and the extension that NYSED gave us.
So to clarify, yes, they are allowed. We would encourage them to drive to school and catch the shuttles, or be dropped off at the schools and catch the shuttles instead of driving back and forth. So yes, they can catch the shuttles, and we would encourage them to catch the shuttles. Mr. Groff, how do you feel about the students driving themselves?
As far as I'm okay with that. We've had that protocol in the past. Obviously, we would encourage kids to, ride for free. But if that's, something parents are okay with, then that's up to parents.
I would just ask that they communicate with the coaches as well. As long as the coaches know how students are getting to practice, who's showing up which way, that's on our end. That's all I need. But the kids can drive themselves. So I'll give everybody a minute to keep typing in questions. Are you going to screen the off-day kids when they get to practice?
Yes, Mr. Harper alluded to that a few minutes ago, and the coaches will be screening the athletes that had off that day, and they will be temp checking also.
So it's the temp check and the questionnaire. For students that get dropped off at school, we'll set something up for them before they get on the shuttle bus. They might just need to get here a couple minutes early, run through the attendance office and get checked there for our students. But we'll work with that first shuttle run on Monday. We'll go slow. We'll make sure somebody's at the shuttle bus to temp check and ask the questions, and then we'll see how many students we have showing up. And then, as Mr. Groff said, all of his students are in 5 days a week, so they're temp checked at the beginning of the day. So they don't need to have any temp check done at the end of the day to get on the shuttle bus.
Yeah, I would just like to add that it's always been very important to have the emergency contact information and the paperwork turned in. As all of you know, we moved to Family ID for athletic registration, and it's very, very critical that your athlete's information is filled out prior to day one of their practice, because they're not going to be allowed to practice until that's completed. And it's make sure your emergency contacts are all set and ready to go in the event that we need to get a hold of you or the next in line if you're not available.
And as people are putting in questions, I'm going to put the link to our Family ID in the school, in the chat for anybody. Next question.
That is our mask going to be supplied for athletes. We are having that discussion. I'm having that discussion with the administrators. We have checked with Jeff Peterson at BSN Sports to see if we could get some masks. I don't know exactly if we're going to be supplying them for all the kids, but there will be ones available if they need them.
Yep, we've supplied students with washable masks. We'll make sure each coach has a small supply of disposable masks available for students that need them. For everybody watching, I put in the link for Family ID for registration. There's two different links. There's JV and varsity, and then modified as well. Next up, if there are injuries, hopefully not, what will be the course of action to notify parents?
We will need, each coach will have to have emergency contact information on hand. Every coach will have that. So we will contact the parents immediately.
And that's a good point. We get that information from Family ID and the registrations. Are coaches allowed to work out with players to prepare for an upcoming season? Can I work out with individual players in preparation for the basketball season?
I'm trying to read that myself and make sure I get an understanding of what you're asking right now. I guess we have no control kind of what you do outside of the school day and the community fields and stuff like that. I would say no to playing or to practicing on community fields. I'm sorry, onto the school fields. Okay, so as an individual, you working out with another player is up to you. I don't think we have much control over that.
And I'll put the vote in for, we're trying to figure out sports in general, so we won't be having any open gyms anytime soon. We've got to get through the first part of the fall season before we even start thinking about open gyms, number one. And winter sports is a totally different kind of activity set that I don't think the ADs have really even started discussing what winter sports look like.
Well, no, and winter sports right now are lumped into that high risk category, the same as volleyball, because of the contact and the fact that it's indoors.
Are all sports requiring masks?
Yes, we will be requiring masks for all our sports. I don't know what the winter looks like, as Kobe just said. We have no idea, what the sports will look like for winter at this point.
And a good follow-up question to the requiring masks. If a player is having a tough time breathing, can they take the mask off and continue playing?
The answer to that now is yes. They can do that if they're having trouble breathing.
And we've got that question.
I'm sorry. We do want the athletes to be wearing the mask during practices, during drills, as much as they can. That's what our goal is. That's what we're hoping for. If they're really having a tough time breathing, then if it's strenuous exercise, then they will be able to take the mask off.
Mr. Groff, I'm sure you've gotten the questions from parents about PE and recess. And our teachers are doing a great job right now of recognizing when and how a student can wear a mask during PE and recess. Our coaches are doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I would just say to obviously parents, let your athletes know, and athletes that are tuning in, be honest with your coaches. If you need a break, just like if kids are in a classroom right now and they need a mask break, they just need to identify that. I think when we spoke specifically with Mr. Steiner last week in preparing for this, one of the things that he had mentioned is obviously for extended running periods, I think the plan is to, try to separate athletes and take a mask off and do that strenuous running and not have a mask on at that particular time.
I think there's a clarification of winter sports being lumped in as high risk.
I'm not sure where skiing is. I've studied the 50-page document that we received from the state, but I didn't notice what skiing was lumped in at. I'm not sure. I could look it up real quick.
We'll get back to you.
Does their helmet? Does a helmet count as a face covering?
Yeah, I don't know where skiing falls in. So, Mr. Owens, yes, skiing was lumped into one in that instance for sure.
We'll double check and get back to you, Mr. Steiner. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we received 2 different invites for Family ID. Should I call the school to confirm his registration and his info was received? Mr. Hahn, is that called to you or to Mrs. Carr? I know Mrs. Carr does all our Family ID for student registration. Can she also look into the sports registrations?
She can, but that phone call can come into me or Mr. Steiner. They are two separate registrations, so to speak, but your account information is saved, so you don't have to re-enter all of your demographic information and things such as that. The questions, the health history questionnaire, you'll have to complete again because things can change between sports seasons and really at any moment. So, but it should really be pretty quick. If you're unsure, email Mr. Steiner, call the school, and we'll look into it and get you squared away.
So Beth, that was to Kobe, Mr. Hahn, or Mr. Steiner, just to confirm. So the guidance says that if an athlete can't tolerate a mask, they can say just that and not have to wear it. Yeah, the guidance does say if they can't tolerate it, but that's not going to be a universal and one-time statement from our athletes. Again, our coaches are going to be watching what the activity is. That tolerating is going to be associated with strenuous exercise. So that's not going to be just a one-time, I can't wear it, I'm never going to wear it again. The assumption is they start with wearing it and they work with their coaches and go from there.
I think the emphasis really is on making sure we're trying to be safe with each other. So I think that's, something our athletes really need to understand and, keep everyone safe, and masking up happens to be one of those things right now.
It's a detailed question about levels. I do not know the answer, Mr. Steiner.
Are the teams set for JV and varsity, or will there be tryouts? Every year there's tryouts for sports. We do not anticipate any cutting of any athletes at this time. The teams are, the athletes have signed up. Most have signed up on Family ID. We have an idea of our numbers. With the announcement of volleyball being played in the spring, our numbers could jump in both sports, soccer and cross country. So we'll find that out in the next day or two when we put another sign out sheet out. Can I go back to the ski question real quick? I just looked it up, and skiing is not listed. Skiing is not listed in any of the low or moderate risk sports at this time. So I don't know. It'll be something we'll look into.
It's not listed at all, high,
No.
medium, or low?
No, it's not in any of them.
Okay. All right, cross country.
We would like the athletes to be wearing their masks while they're running. We would like that. But if they're having a problem breathing while they're running, they will be able to take the mask off. And again, hopefully it's only for a minute or two, and then maybe they can put it back on again.
So that's going to be a discussion with the players and the teams as we go through. This is a question that comes up yearly. Are
seventh graders allowed to move up to JV? The way it's handled nowadays is the athletes need to come to the athletic director and say that they would like to try out for JV. So that's the first step. There are lots of hoops to jump through for a seventh grader to move up. Actually, let me go back and start again, because one of the things that's in our handbook is that if there's 3 levels of a sport and a seventh grader is coming out for a sport, we expect the seventh grader to play 1 year of modified, at least. Okay, so I guess the answer to that question is that we will not be moving seventh graders up to JV if there's a JV level, or if there's 3 levels.
And for the parents that are coming up into seventh grade from elementary, we can make that document available for everybody because we've, over the last 3 years, Mr. Groff, Mr. Stein, Mr. Hahn, we've been working on that document and really trying to update it to reflect our philosophy and trying to make sure that players are playing at the appropriate level, but also taking their time and moving through the levels. So you are correct, Mr. Steiner. It is 1 year at the modified level. Give people another couple minutes. We're coming in around 45 minutes at this point, so we will wrap it up shortly. I know that I find these very helpful to get information out to a bunch of people at one time. I know that the four of us have at least talked about having another meeting as we get closer to games, because that's a whole different subject that we obviously have a lot of questions out there about. So we can do another one of these in the next couple weeks for parents, especially as we start games up. Will neck gaiters be allowed in place of masks? If Mr. Groff, from my point of view, if we allow neck gaiters in schools as a form of a mask, I would be for allowing them during practices and games as well. I don't know your thoughts.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
So yes, neck gaiters will be allowed. So we'll just give it another minute or so for any last minute questions. But as we're wrapping up, I really do appreciate everybody coming out. I'll echo Mr. Steiner's words from the beginning. There's lots of things to do at 7 o'clock at night on a Monday, and I appreciate everybody spending time with us to discuss athletics. Good question.
Yes, the answer to that question is if we go fully remote, sports will not be happening. Sports will not be started again unless we go back to in-school education.
Good question.
Probably as a closing statement or just thoughts. First of all, to our athletes, obviously from an adult perspective, our deepest apologies. We got to go through this. I know some of you lost spring last year. The fall is not going to look the way it's normally looked. Obviously, if we're not permitted to have spectators, it's going to look a whole lot different. But I guess just the thing to keep in mind is we're trying to give you something, provide opportunity that obviously was missed last spring, and provide as much as we can. And again, just our utmost request to ask for your patience and diligence as we walk through this together and try to come together to give you opportunities.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Groff, and I think it's very important to focus on what we can do and what we're allowed to do at this point, as opposed to what we're not allowed to do. I know that's difficult to do, but if you look at where we were in the spring, where we had nothing in regards to interscholastic athletics, this is at least a step in the right direction. So I'm thankful for that. As someone who loves sports, I really, really sympathize with our athletes and our parents in both communities, and the attitudes overall have been wonderful. And so I thank you for that, and know that we're doing everything that we can to give you guys a sports season.
Maybe a really good question to end on, because I think this is talking about communication. How will the community fans who don't have students in school be notified of whether or not they are able to attend? Fantastic question. And I immediately went to, if we can't have fans, Hornell can't have fans, Canaseraga can't have fans. I think this is a local push of information in our area whether that's on the radio, whether that's on the news, the Hornell, the Spectator. But we will get that information out, even if it comes down to doing some mailings out to our community. Because both schools, we have a lot of fans who'd love to come out and just see kids play year after year.
I would also say, Holly, I mean, assuming you check, the district Facebook pages and websites, both districts do or try to do a good job of getting information out on those two platforms. I'm sure we'll continue to do that and, try to use those pieces of social media to provide that information. And if we can, do the streaming piece, create those links and make sure that those are available to everybody.
Anything else, Mr. Steiner? We'll give you the last word.
Thank you again Thank you again for your patience and your flexibility and everything else. We're going to need to be very flexible in the next couple of weeks and pay attention to the remind announcements. Those are going to be very important. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. You'll hear from us soon.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Have a good night.